All right, and welcome to another episode of Chekpoint, the podcast highlighting and telling the stories of influential leaders in and around the sports industry. Today, we are excited to welcome our next guest, Malcolm Lemmons, to the show. Malcolm is a former professional basketball player and has been an entrepreneur and two-time best-selling author. He has written books such as Lessons from the Game and Impact Beyond the Game, which helps athletes prepare for life after sport. If you haven't read them yet, guys, I strongly encourage you to listen to this podcast and then go check them out. Malcolm has leveraged his business background from Niagara University, along with his travels across the world, to continue to pave the way for athletes as they hang up their cleats. I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited to hop into this podcast. Malcolm, my man, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I can't complain, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity, man. It's great to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, for all you first-time listeners, Chekpoint is a podcast, again, highlighting influential leaders in sport, but really using this time to, sort of learn about your journey, Malcolm, how you got here, what you're currently working on, and more importantly, where do you see this crazy world going over the next, 3 to 5 years? So, without wasting any time, excited for you to go ahead and, let the listeners into, your crazy story, which you told me offline. So who is Malcolm and how'd you get here, bud?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, that's a very lengthy starting point. But, if I had to sum it up, man, I'm an overall hustler. I'm a grinder, growing up in the inner city of DC, being raised by a single parent mother, and her having to take care of my brother and I, and just moving several times when I was younger, going through a lot of obstacles, kind of molded me and shaped me into the person that I am today. And like I said, I give my mom a lot of credit for that. But growing up, had this dream, this goal of pursuing a professional basketball career, and I chased it, man. I chased that throughout high school, college. Was fortunate enough to go play a couple of years overseas and live out that dream. Then I transitioned out of the game and had to kind of start from ground zero, and just been enjoying the process. So I would just say, to sum it up, I'm just a grinder, man. Someone who just loves the journey and relishes in figuring it all out day by day.
I mean, that's, ultimately what it's all about, life's all about choices, and, you have continually been carving your way out and not only making a positive impact for yourself and the group around you, but, by taking those thoughts and putting it on paper, now you're able to spread that word with everybody. And, I just cracked open your book, and, it really resonates with me because, look, I played college ball, and now, when you hang those cleats up, they don't really tell you what it's like when they don't structure the day from 6 to 6 and, really what that life looks like. So, curious, what made you, start to write? Why did you choose that medium to communicate with folks?
That's a great question. I get that almost every podcast that I get on, but I always tell people that, man, it was an accident. I never had any aspirations of becoming a writer or an author. It was just something I did because I had time, and I found it to be therapeutic. Especially being overseas, people think that playing overseas, it could be a glamorous lifestyle. You get to travel, you get to experience in different cultures, you're getting paid to do something that you love, but at the same time, there's a lot of trials and obstacles that you experience, from being homesick to not really fitting in. And just things of that nature. So my second year overseas, I came over there in the middle of the season. We had about a month-long break, and just having that time on my hands, not really knowing the city, my teammates, and not even having Wi-Fi. I didn't even have Wi-Fi. I just had a computer. And so I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about, like, how did I get to this point in my life? Like, what did I go through to become a professional athlete? And I just started to write. I started to recount all those things that I went through. And like I said, it was therapeutic. It was a means of reflection for me. But as I started to put out my story and talk about, to other people what I was doing while I was over there, and kind of my story as an athlete, people started to say how much my story could inspire other athletes and how it can impact other athletes who might be going through similar things, or might, be on their way to going through similar things. So I felt like I was doing it injustice by not telling my story and writing was the most natural way of communicating for me, and something that I still do every day just because it checks those boxes. It's therapeutic, and it's something I'm good at. So I think we all need to find our way of best communicating with the world, and writing is that for me.
Amazing, man. And I think so much, we're bringing influencers on here, right? From athletic administrators to athletes to coaches. And one of the through lines there, Malcolm, is legacy, right? We talk about how can we as a human being, as an individual and as a species, leave a legacy that's going to be better than, the one that we absorbed. And I think that writing, that's tried and true, right? Like all the way back to the Bible, up into your books, those imprints just keep getting produced. And so, an amazing way to go ahead and leave that legacy, and just the beginning for you, which is really cool. So, look at, man, with this podcast, we get an opportunity to talk about real things. And in 2020, look at the world got flipped upside down from, coronavirus. And with this pandemic, it again exposed so much of what is going on in this country that we've been dealing with for decades now, centuries at this point. I'm really curious, through your self-reflection and writing and through your experience traveling the world, how has that prepared you to take the bull by the horns and be a leader, with, social reform and, big shakeups in the athletic world?
I think first and foremost, I think when you grow up in a city where you're not only surrounded by politicians and legislation and just the understanding of, people don't even get that there's so much poverty in and around DC, but we also have, it's one of the most powerful cities in the world. And so seeing those polar contrasts and growing up in and around that, you're automatically, you have a different perspective on the world. And even just as I began to get older and just expose myself to different types of people and understand different perspectives, and then going overseas and experiencing a completely new culture. I would say that my entire life has prepared me to kind of speak up on these issues and to really shed light on what it's like growing up in a certain environment, being Black, and also understanding other people's point of views and trying to bridge the gap between the two. And I think just healthy dialogue and having conversations about what's going on is definitely the starting point, along with educating ourselves on the nuances. And so obviously it's been extremely frustrating from a number of different, factors. But I think the most important thing is empathy, man, and really just, hearing each other out and continuing the conversation and progressing forward as a country, because we're not getting anywhere by not doing so. We're staying stagnant where we're not trying to empathize and understand and connect with one another. So I think having that healthy dialogue is the only way. And, that's kind of been my entire approach this entire year, is just to continuously learn and to inform my peers and to have conversations that help us all learn and grow and really try to move forward and get through these difficult times. Because like you said, we've been experiencing for these problems for a number of years. This is not anything new. But there's a heightened awareness, I think, with technology and social media, and our ability to connect that way. So I think it's just through dialogue and constantly having, constructive conversations throughout it all.
And there's no more excuses, right? We're able to hop on Zoom. There's all kinds of forums going on. And I think, you hit on the point that is, for me, been the through line of all of this is, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Right. And so I think coming into these circumstances, whether it's athletics and, evolving that, or, your inner city and the way that politics are run, we need to be able to listen with an open mind, understand and empathize. Right. And I think that, you're seeing a lot of sport leagues start to take the bull by the horn. The NBA's not only done a great job of innovating, with Microsoft and the way they're handling this bubble, but then they're also saying, hey, we're more than athletes, right? And I think that sort of, molds right into you saying, hey, there's more to me than just how I dribble and slam dunk the ball. You got to hear my voice as a human being. And so really cool. I don't know, not a question for you on that one. It's just a little soapbox of, man, I just got to tell you, it's just so neat to be able to have this dialogue in the face of so much adversity. So, back to the questions. So talk to me, man. during your tenure as an athlete, and then, you know, starting to transition to entrepreneurship, what were some of the biggest changes that you witnessed, you know, from a technological infusion? You know, how did they change the game? What were they? Really curious on that.
Yeah, man. I mean, obviously, and I started before the conversation. You asked me about my story by saying that, you know, when you go from doing something your entire life, chasing one thing your entire life, then abruptly having to stop and start at ground zero, there is a number of different challenges that comes with that. And so I think with me, you know, always having a sense that I wanted to be in business in some capacity, I always had entrepreneurial tendencies at a young age and knew that that was probably going to be the path for me. Knowing that and then actually having to do it is two separate, you know, totally completely different things. And so I would say day by day, I'm always trying to figure it out, you know, whether it's new technology, you know, that emerges and trying to pivot companies and ideas that I have. It's consistently, you know, understanding that things happen rapidly, but understanding that you have to constantly evolve with the times and be able to adjust on the fly. And so that's what it's kind of been for me. And then just going back to enjoying the process, enjoying the journey of being an entrepreneur, because you're not going to figure it out overnight. And I think a lot of people think that entrepreneurship is a quick way to make a lot of money, and it's not. It's more about, are you willing to stick with this through the ups and the downs, much like being a you know, professional athlete, stick with it through the ups and downs, through the obstacles, through the good times and the bad times, to figure this out, to figure this game out. And do you really love it enough to do so? And so I just try to stay persistent as much as possible and just continuously try to pursue something I love day by day.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. And I think, you know, it's always interesting as we talk about technology starting to involve itself in our life more and more. It's invasive almost, right? Like, I mean, I just dropped my phone in the water this weekend. Malcolm, you would think, man, I lost my whole life, you know, like, I mean, everything's gone. And I'm always fascinated how we maintain being human, whether that's in the collegiate sports world, the professional and youth sports world, and business. How do we keep a human relationship with this technology? And so I was fascinated with this. You don't know this question's coming, but, you know, with you being a writer, you know, I have some other friends that have written books, and so much of it's done on paper, right? Because it's just like that hand to paper, you feel it, it's coming right off the dome. I'm curious, do you do a lot of typing? Do you use a typewriter? How do you use technology when, you know, you go into your author realm?
Oh, when it comes to books, man, I'm new school. I'm straight pages with it.
Love it.
I'm straight pages with it. But I definitely have a certain approach and way that I format my thoughts when it comes to any book ideas or any articles that I'm going to write. It's a certain process. And I think that's the most important thing, is establishing a routine for yourself, so that when you are in that creative flow, when you are trying to, you know, put the words to paper, so to speak, it can come out as effective as possible, and you're putting the words out in an effective manner that the reader can understand. And so I think that process and having a kind of a system in place, no matter how you're actually doing the writing, you know, typewriter, pen and paper, or straight up pages, you have to have some type of process that you actually go through that helps you convey the words that you're trying to convey.
And I think that foundation right there is so paramount when we talk about, you know, getting larger messages out to an audience, right? Words matter. And when you have a consistent process, you're able to go ahead and not just reach people that think like you, but you can reach the masses, because you can, you know, there's a medium there where, you know, you're going through the same consistent process each time. And I appreciate you shedding light on that. That's it's quite fascinating. And I think it's just a skill set that needs to be honed in on by more individuals, because we all have great thoughts, but it's how effective we communicate those, right? And yeah. So super interesting. So I think we start to get an idea of who Malcolm is, where you come from, how you got here. Why don't you tell the listeners, you know, beyond the book, what else are you working on right now to help shape the sports world?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you know, anytime you launch a book, that comes with its fair share of opportunities and attention and awareness. And one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of athletes about is, helping them with the marketing, branding side, how they can maximize their value during their career. So actually in the process of launching an athlete marketing and branding firm, gonna be helping athletes, like I said, maximize that value, kind of capitalize on their relevance, partner with brands, really just build their brand, their overall brand. So excited to get that off the ground. I think there's a huge opportunity there, especially with name, image, and likeness and student athletes, as
Yep.
that whole world that's going to be coming next year. So super excited, man, and excited to make an impact on a lot of athletes' lives.
I'm curious that, and this is a great segue into where I wanted to go, because we've talked to ADs and we've talked to coaches. Name, image, likeness is going to shake the NCAA maybe just as much as coronavirus did, right? Like, I mean, there are huge ripples going to come from this. Now that you're on the outside looking in on ways to help athletes monetize and way to help them build their personal brand, what have those conversations been like with administrators or other platforms, if you've had them before?
Yeah, so I talked to a AD not too long ago, and I think NIL is on the minds of a lot of administrators at this point in time. I think COVID is definitely the priority, but they're starting to put programming and resources and figuring out different ways they can help their student athletes be prepared for this new transition. And there's obviously a lot of concerns that come with that, because there is a level of uncertainty. This has never been done before. So I think ADs and administrators and people who work with and around student athletes are concerned about mainly representation and what that's going to look like. And people trying to poach and take advantage of student athletes, I think that's a huge concern for them. Also, maybe time management and how student athletes are going to be able to balance having a business or building their brand along with their performance on the court or field and their schoolwork. What is that going to look like? And so I think there's a number of different concerns, but I think as a whole, everyone who supports student athletes and is in favor of them being able to have equal rights and the same rights as everyone else, is excited for this new world, this transition, and I think it's well deserved. And I think a lot of student athletes are going to benefit from it. From the biggest names to smaller athletes who maybe need to support their families and send a little bit of money back home. They're able to start a little business that allows them to do so. So I think there's a huge opportunity here, and I'm excited. But it's also at the understanding that there's going to be mistakes made, and something we're going to have to continuously learn through for the next several years and figure this thing out together.
Yeah, no, well said. And I mean, just for some context, Chekpoint was built because of our company Chek. And, we are an alternative cash management solution, sort of right at that intersection of, the university distributing funds out to athletes. And, we're starting to have some of those conversations on, how are these going to be structured, right? How do you handle taxes? How do you handle, some of the behind the scenes of making sure that, there is accountability for those funds, and, you don't have athletes becoming more focused on the business than the sport or the academics. Right. And so it's really interesting to see all the different angles in which, you have to think about this even before you take put one toe in the water. So it's super fascinating. I just got to take a step back, man, because I never thought I went to school in 09 to 14. And if you would have told me in 2020 that, college athletes would be able to earn money on their name, or 2021, I probably would have laughed at you,
Right.
And so I'm like, man, this world, I can't imagine when I have kids and they're listening to this podcast, what is it going to look like? I mean, the world is just changing faster than I could have ever imagined. And, on that bridge, man, we both believe sports can teach us a bunch about life. And so I'm curious, where do you see it going over the next, let's just use 3 years, something digestible?
Specifically in terms of name, image, and likeness?
Let's use that as a bridge, but then sort of, mushroom cloud it out into the bigger sports paradigm.
Man, I mean, there's a ton of opportunities in sports. I think COVID has shaken up a lot of things. And so, with artificial intelligence and just AR and virtual reality and all these different these innovations that have kind of come, as I think, a little bit quicker because of COVID. I think we'll start to see a lot more of that virtual virtual fan seating and stuff of that, things of that nature. But when it comes to name, image, and likeness, I mean, I think athletes' brands are just going to continuously evolve, and the amount of opportunities that athletes have during their playing careers will be in abundance. And you'll start to see athletes who are not the main, the mainstream names or the top athletes in the sport. You're going to start to see guys who come off the bench who might be, able to command more opportunities because of their social media presence. So I think digital platforms and athletes' brands in terms of just relevance and overall attention is going to matter so much more. And we'll start to see more athletes involved in different ventures during their careers. And so, as I said before, name, image, and likeness just presents such a huge opportunities, even for high school athletes who are coming into college, what that's going to look like and the type of resources they're going to need now that, name, image, and likeness is a thing. So there's a ton of opportunity on the horizon. I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than we think.
Yeah. And just imagine beyond the game, right? Now we're able to go ahead and you're building while you're in high school, you're building while you're in college, getting all these, what we would take intangible skill sets that employers loved about athletes. And now you're applying them to your brand. And now you're applying them to your business. And so the transition, I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be rocky to get there. But I think it's going to be so much more streamlined to put athletes in a more advantageous position when they graduate and hang up their cleats to bridge into the real world. And I think, both of us being former athletes, that was my biggest disservice when I looked back on it all was I got really good. I was a punter. So I got really good at kicking a football and all the intangible stuff, work ethic, hustle, all that followed me. But what the hell do I do with the countless hours I worked on kicking a football? That doesn't translate, And so I think it is interesting to see that athletes will get that real world perspective through name, image, and likeness that will follow them for the rest of their career. And ultimately, if we're about advancing the athlete, if we're about, making this a better experience, then I think there's nothing but good things on the horizon. So super exciting, man. And look, we got folks like yourself that have been chewed up and spit out by the system that are now coming back to say, hey, you don't have to make the same mistakes, learn from mine. And, we'll keep this thing moving upstream, that's ultimately what it's all about, right? Reach one, teach one. So
exactly.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, look, as we start to wind down, want to come back to the personal side of things. And, I've used this question. It used to be a dating question for me. Now I'm married, so it's all networking and podcast related. But Malcolm, I'm curious, if you could tell the listeners one thing that you've done in your life that you would recommend they do or experience in theirs, what would that be and why?
I love this question. I'd probably say go live or spend some time living in a different country. And mainly because going back to what I said before about the ability to connect with people, to understand where someone else is coming from. I think living in Japan on and off for 2 years taught me so much, not only about survival, but just about people and how we all come from different walks of life. But, if you really get under the skin, we're all the same. We all have the same fears. We all have the same things that we're worried about in life. And when you can understand that about another person, then you can build that empathy and it helps us kind of grow together and move forward as a civilization. So I think living somewhere else, living in a different country, just experiencing a new culture and ingraining yourself in that just gives you an experience that is invaluable. That really just teaches you a lot. So I would highly suggest that someone do that at least for a couple months.
I love it. And it's funny because a lot of times that gets flipped back on me. Scott, what would you tell somebody? And Malcolm, we share the same answer, man. And for all of our listeners, if if it's COVID related or you don't have the funds, get out here domestically. Go outside of your comfort zone. Go drive to the middle of the country to Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. Go drive to the West Coast or the Northeast and go with an open mind because we are all humans. And at the end of the day, I think I won't speak on all, but the majority of people want to make this place better than they found it. And I think once you get that grasp and you feel it, then it becomes contagious, right? You just want to share that with everybody. So Amazing answer. Malcolm, if you want to go ahead and just do a subtle plug for your books, for your company, where can we find you? How can folks get in touch if they're interested in learning more and connecting with you?
For sure, Scott. First and foremost, thank you for having me. They can, get the book on Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble. Book is on, any major book retailer, and that's Impact Beyond the Game. And you can get in contact with me on social media at Malcolm Lemmons on every single social media platform. Then check out my website at malcomlemmons.com. And the company is called Klarity Sports Group, and just be on the lookout. It's coming to you in the next couple of weeks.
Amazing. So we'll go ahead. We're going to post all those links here when we drop the episode, so you can get directed right to his book. Again, I highly recommend reading it. If you enjoyed this podcast, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what Malcolm has to offer. So again, Malcolm, thank you for doing what you do. Thanks for coming on the show, and keep making this world 1% better each day, man.
No doubt.
And until next time, guys, check yourself.